I don't know what I don't know. Being able to like respond with like, I don't know is basically earning trust, right? Like that humility needs to be there in the product because we're not going to solve all problems on day one when we launch the product. So how do you gracefully error out, right? Like that's a separate track and consideration for trust. I think of these generative AI tools as really a creator's aid or a creator's friend. And once you have learned how to use some of these tools, right, like the world's your oyster, you could do pretty much anything you wanted. And I feel like in a future world, people who know how to use these tools, creators who know how to use these tools, are going to be so far ahead than folks that have not taken the steps to learn to use these tools. To me, it's the people that matter. Because ideas are, I mean, if you've been in any startup or if you've done your own startup, you know how many times you pivot before you kind of land on the thing that you're building, right? Like, so it's almost inevitable that you will change your initial idea. So it's really who is the set of people you're working with, and it's not even the number of people. It's just are they working well together? Are they set up with the same dream? And do they have a well formulated plan?
All right, welcome to AI Portfolio Podcast, the place where you get to learn from experts and companies building great products with machine learning. Today, we have Sujatha Sundararaman. She's the head of search, understanding, and voice at YouTube Music at Google. Previously, she led teams at VMware as a director of R&D and Cisco as a senior engineering manager. So I'm very excited to learn about music recommendation at scale. I'm a big YouTube Premium and YouTube Music user, so I'm actually even more excited to talk about some of these topics today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Okay. Let's start with, what are you really most excited about with all this large language model stuff that's happening? It's in almost every product, but what excites you about it in the space of music and music recommendations?
It's a great question. This is not new technology for what it's worth. Like, it's been there for many years now. And Google certainly has been playing with it for a while now. But to me, it feels like our bets on this technology have been placed a while ago, and we are continuing to execute on what we have envisioned along the way. And the most exciting thing about this is probably the fact that a lot of people know, in my opinion. I mean, you go to, social events or, family get-togethers, and people ask you about this stuff. And that was not the case, even like this time last year. So I feel like people can more relate to what I do these days than anything else. And I find that quite exciting, including my children, whom I'm super proud of, extremely different interests. But, a big part of what excites me about the consumer space as a whole is, people like yourself saying, hey, I'm a, music and premium user and I can relate to your product. And my children say the same thing. Oh, you work in music. That's so cool, Mom. I'm like, okay, cool.
Yes.
So, yeah. I don't think it's a specific part of the technology itself that I find exciting. I think that's been there for a while now, and it continues to be exciting in terms of its capabilities, but its relatability to our users. I think that's the part I find exciting.
It does seem like a very special time where, my parents are talking about it, like, oh, I kind of understand what you do now, and like, oh, how can I use it for this, and how can I use it for that? So that's quite cool. Why is music important?
Wow, that's such a nice open-ended question. So thank you for the question. In so many ways. First, maybe I'll talk about sort of the consumer angle, and then I'll talk about the tech angle of why music is important. So we have a lot of user research that talks to this as well. And having, Gen Zs sort of your teenagers or a little lower than teenagers all the way up to like the early 20s is kind of defined as Gen Zs. So that generation has sort of a music first attitude. So they say everything starts at home. So music's important because my girls are majorly into music. It's a form of expression. Um, and so that makes it very real for me. They wake up, I know they have woken up because I can hear music. So it's real
Really?
for
Oh,
many of
wow.
our users. And sort of the late teens to early 20s, they express music more generically, like almost like a mood way of saying it. I want to feel happy, or I'm feeling depressed today, or this person said something hurtful to me and I want music to cure me. Like there's just so many uses of music that are very practical. um, I played around a little bit in the healthcare space before. I'll say played around because there are like so many giants who've done enormous contributions in the healthcare space. I was nowhere near that, so it was just dabbling a little bit. But it was the most fulfilling time because you feel like you make an impact on human beings. Um, Music's not that close to that level of impact, but it's relatable to that level of impact. You actually touch people's emotions, you touch people's quality of life. So it provides its own meaning when it comes to consumers consuming music, and you're in a domain that helps users in a real way. Um, Another way music's important is because most of the researchers that are working on technology, including music, many domains leverage this type of AI technology, actually are music lovers themselves. So it feels very natural to have data sets that are related to music, to experiment with, to train with. Everybody has their own my music thing. So it's very common, I would say, to see research kind of advance in music first and then get applied to other domains,
Hmm.
irrespective of what it is applied for. So that also makes music important from sort of the technology evolution perspective. Um, Music's kind of important for YouTube as a business too. I cannot imagine YouTube without music. I don't think anybody can. So it's kind of like the table stakes for when it comes to, platforms like YouTube. So that also makes music important. So whether it is from a consumer point of view, whether it's from a technology evolution point of view, or whether it's from a business point of view, I feel like music's super important.
Wow. I Those are very interesting points. And I was actually thinking about the, quote unquote Gen Z experience when I came across, because, I was listening to music. I have YouTube Premium. When as I've maybe explored different data sets, I always wonder what the diversification of listening patterns are. So for me, I have the same 5 songs and I'll play them, I don't know, for about 3 months straight every single day. And everyone around me is just like, please get rid of that music. While others are bleeding edge, only new songs every day. And it's very interesting that your daughters start music immediately in the morning. And I think one of the things I appreciate about your product is the diversity of what quote unquote music is. All right. So I might listen to a lot of motivational things in the morning that have a melodic tone underneath, but it's a different message. And as you shift in the evening and modulating all the moods I have throughout the day, giving me energy at different times. It's a very
Exactly.
interesting problem to solve.
I think we also tend to think about it as like, an exploration versus exploitation thing, right? Like for your 5 songs, it's more like the exploitation thing. Okay, you've listened to it, we've personalized it to, you have watched this. And so you're probably likely to see it again. And, it's a very repeatable experience. And then the exploration part is like, as you start to explore the next 5 songs, as people around you are like, yeah, no more of these 5, Mark, right? Like, and then you're like, okay, what are the adjacencies that I should be exploring, given that I like these 5 songs? And, your recommendation engines kind of try to move along these lines as well. So diversity sort of in the relatable space, and then recommending to you things that we know you would enjoy, but also things that we think you may enjoy. and sort of expanding that space for you.
Mm-hmm.
You asked about Gen Zs and different listening patterns. So YouTube Shorts comes to mind, right? I know my children are like into short form music very much so. For their discovery, in any case, they are looking at shorts to say, okay, maybe this is the next piece of music that I will look at, and then they socialize it with their friends, and then there is this combination of discovery and social, which is how like music kind of gets discovered, and then it gets consumed in its standard DSP digital streaming platform of choice, right? Whether
Yes.
it's YouTube Music or Spotify or what have you. But sometimes Shorts itself is enough. I have seen that a few times, especially with my younger ones generation. They are just browsing through the next short and the next short and the next short for music, and that seems to satisfy them. And I find that extremely interesting because to me it's the song. I could not be satisfied by that. But looks like even listening patterns are changing, across generations. So it'll be interesting to see if it just stays as a discovery vehicle or if it also, leans into a consumption vehicle as the short length grows and, people have lesser attention spans and listening
Mm-hmm.
patterns.
I think I've even noticed that in myself. I'll listen to a popular song that I like, but then I listen to the actual version of it versus having it in a mix where it's that portion that I really like, and I'm listening to the whole song. I'm like, what's happening here? And I almost find myself getting a little more annoyed now than I did probably before because my mind is being conditioned to the short form music. So this is, um, and would you say the prevalence of, well, I imagine the prevalence of mixes has really come about in the age of almost anyone can become a DJ and a selector, these types of things. What's your thoughts on that trend of mixes versus pure songs?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's almost one of the advantages of YouTube Music that you seed it and then it kind of takes care of you from there. Of course, it needs to know you on the platform a little bit so that it can personalize for you. But if you have been a repeat user, let's say your first month of free trial is done and now you're a music user, for sure we have enough signals to come up with this mix for you that we think you'll really enjoy. Mixes can be compared to a lot of different types of listening experiences, right? For example, you could compare it to a playlist that you curate yourself. So you've added, I don't know, 40, 50, 100 songs, and then you've shared it with your friends. And now, this is the playlist, your go-to playlist for motivation in the morning or something like this. Versus a mix where maybe you just gave it one song of a certain beat and you told it, I just want a high beat, high energy music, go. And then it curated this mix, which is like really good for workout in the mornings or something like this. And these are comparable listening experiences. It depends a little bit on your personality, I think. If you really enjoyed variety and being surprised a little bit on what may come up next, you may prefer mixes as a listening experience. And if you wanted to do, the exact same routine every day with the exact same song sequence and the exact same beat patterns, and you liked predictability, you may enjoy sort of like the playlist experience. There are other types. You may have, others curate things for you, right? And
Right.
then we have these patterns called algoterial, where you're not just seeding it with one song, but we have a set of songs, and then you take off from there in terms of algorithmically. So you could get to a predictable set of seeds from in the beginning, but then you just kind of let it wander off. Maybe you're training for a marathon or something, and then it can kind of keep pace with you, and we understand music deeply enough to know like what is the beats per second and what is the valence and what's the mood and what's the genre that you like. And so there's lots of things that we know about you as a user, and then about music, its content, and your context in terms of like, okay, you're listening to it on this device, or you're listening to it in the morning, and this is what you typically end up doing in the morning. What is the job this music is doing for you? So we have a framework around jobs to be done, and we could really come up with something super pleasurable. So I find sort of this space to be a real advantage when you are a YouTube music user.
Indeed. And why is the music recommendation problem so difficult?
It's a great question, isn't it? I think we touched upon this a little bit in terms of like being able to tune that knob between exploration and exploitation. That could lead to one challenge when we don't know how much diversity a user may like. Um, Here's a pop quiz for you, right? If you were, as a data scientist, measuring data that said some countries are preferring more diverse listening than others, or if you were measuring people and saying, based on age, some people aged X greater than Y, the group of X prefers less diversity and Y prefers more diversity. Where would you place your money? Is it the country? Is it a country level theme or is it an age level theme?
Probably both. I would
Probably.
attempt to. I would attempt
You
to
had to
model
pick.
both.
Which one
Right?
would you pick as more
Mm,
influential?
as more
Let's,
influential. Ooh,
yeah.
probably country.
That's a good
That
one.
would be
Yeah.
my yeah. Because
You
there's
are spot on.
identity in country, right?
Yeah, you're spot on. Actually, I picked age for what it's worth when I was placing my guesses, and turns out that India, where I'm from, is a country that really likes diversity. And there were countries, I want to say, if I remember correctly, like Korea, that preferred more of the constant, here is the popular music, and like people
Mm-hmm.
like to tune into popular music. And yeah, YouTube music is popular in both of these markets quite a bit. So being able to, tune your algorithms to know how to serve a population of people, like that makes the problem challenging for one. The second aspect of it is things that may get lost in aggregates. So personalization is a real thing, right? So you want to understand your users and you want to personalize and make it delightful for their aspect. But imagine you're working on sort of a search problem and it's a broad query. So let's say, I don't know, play jazz. There's just so many different forms to pick from, and you have to really know the user. And if you think about how the stack works, you're probably placing a bet on a group of songs that you would retrieve first. And if that part is not personalized, you may not end up with even the core set that you could narrow down to a set of recommendations where any of those candidates, we call these nominations, right, have fit what the user needs. So that in itself means that you don't have enough coverage for what the user wants. So you have to actually personalize at a deeper level and not just maybe rank the last few things in a personalized way by fetching with a generic set of nominations. So as you start personalizing deeper, it becomes a scale problem. How well are you able to scale for all of these different types of personalization embeddings? And so, and then there is the over personalization problem. If you over personalized it and you always gave me, I don't know, rainy Bollywood music anytime I said play music, I'd probably not be super happy with you. So, how do you mix that thing in so that it doesn't get to be, super boring for a person, but definitely stays in context for their listening habits. So those are some aspects of what makes this challenging. And then it's the keeping up with the evolution of technology too, right? Like we were talking about large language models. You start with the collaborative filtering, which is like, been working pretty well for many, many years. And then, as technology evolves, you have to ask the question, so where is this technology best placed? What kind of problems do I want to solve with it? What are problems that I consider sufficiently well solved, which I don't want to churn very much, but what are problems that are new where I'm not doing so well right now, where maybe this new technology can help me out. We don't want it to be the case that yes, we have this cool technology, so we should try deploying it to every problem possible. It should be more a problem-driven thing in the product space where you have a problem, you're looking for a solution, and then this technology applies very well to your use case. So there's a balance there. Like you don't want to be left behind, but at the same time, you don't want to over-index on your bets. So I think these are three lenses I would use for like what makes it challenging.
And what are some other design considerations that you and your team may have to take into consideration when now doing this at scale? Because, for a small data set, couple of genres, that's okay. But now you are like planetary scale trying to recommend music.
Yeah. Definitely a very different problem when it comes to billions of users versus, your tens or hundreds of users. Also a very different problem when it comes to diversity across markets. For example, in India, 4% of the users, or like there is some N% of the users are like pure voice users. So if you did not get your voice technology right, then, you would not even serve those users to start with.
Like, oh, wow. So they speak to the app and that's how they interact.
That's the only way they interact, yeah. So it's more than a scale problem. It's a multidimensional problem. For example, I think typically you are not looking to solve, speech recognizer problems. Like how do I go from, an acoustic model to a lexicon model to a language model, and now everything is like, a large language model. But if you want access to some of these users, you have to solve those problems. You're kind of pretty much forced to. And these problems look very different in terms of like the tech you develop for them, right? Like you have to have, think about what does audio input look like? What is the frame? What is the state? And how do phonemes come out? And what are words? And what are sentences? And what is the meaning of these sentences? Like you'd probably just start with text to start. If you weren't thinking about these users, right? Like, so there is no, all of that pre-processing and models that, we are working with. That's one example of things that we think about. And then when it comes to scale, there's many ways to design a system to scale, right? How many layers of retrieval do you want, or nominators do you want? What are the different types of nominations you want? Do you want something that talks through freshness? Maybe there is a user segment that really wants anything that drops today to be available the minute it drops. And then there's people like my father who are listening to the same 1 hour, of music content every day in the morning and couldn't care less about what albums dropped when, right? Like, so there's like different users and, different nominators that serve the purpose of, different listening habit style and like what people care about. There's also considerations in terms of like, different tiers of artists and understanding the priority of those artists and what that relates to this person. My daughters are majorly, into Taylor Swift, Swifties these days, right? So they'd probably not object to, I don't know, if I did not get some Hindustani recommendation right or something which they listen to once in a while, but they would be like seriously offended if we had mistakes with like, content that Taylor Swift produced in their, recommendation. So when you scale, it's not just about system scale and having more nodes of the same, but when you scale across users, I just gave you different examples of types of users that are, having very different types of requirements. You have to think about recommending to all of these users and your system kind of catering to, 7 billion people in the world who are all a little bit different from each other. So how do you, address that? And that requires layering of, weights and arcs that you may construct a little bit differently for each of these users, and different layers kind of like building on top of each other into a stack that have different purposes. And then how much you weight each one depends on how personalized you want to get, and how much popularity should weigh in into this, how much freshness should weigh into that, what is the priority, what is the industry facing requirements in terms of like how you do this. I'll give you an example of we have a product called Google Assistant, which you may have played with, and we had some requirements from the industry in terms of, if you are a free user, like how much can you get exactly what the user wants, and how many interruptions did you need to build into this product? Because I think the idea is that you would over time become a premium or a paid user. But in the meantime, as you are a free user, you need to get an optimal but not a super optimal experience.
Yes.
So that you get to that premium state. So it comes with its own constraints on the system, in addition to all of the things that we talked about. So it's a pretty complex set of considerations that goes into building these systems.
It does sound very complex, and I think the cost of a bad recommendation, I think, is extremely high, especially when people are in their moods, listen to music, and the next song comes on and it throws their whole mood. I think it can be very jarring versus you showed me the wrong shoe online, and like, okay, whatever, and you move along with life. But it feels like it can really penetrate someone depending on their mood as well.
Absolutely. I think the expectations are high, and there are a couple of features that we built kind of like to address this expectation, because as you can imagine, it's kind of hard to always get something right, given all of these constraints and variables and factors that go into constructing, that result for a broad search query or a recommendation, if you will. So we built, when we are not confident about what the user is asking for, we would choose to disambiguate. We would be like, did you mean the song or the album if you said play Thriller? So that, we are not making a judgment call on your behalf and giving you something suboptimal. This is especially important in certain interfaces, which may be voice forward, not very easy to tune later. Maybe if you're on the phone, you could just select whatever you wanted a little bit more easily, but sometimes you're driving and even on the phone it's not possible. And so asking you for clarification is delightful in such a case where the system's not confident of the answer. We also built steering, which lets you control sort of where you want that recommendation to go. So maybe you asked for something and then we started playing, and then you're like, no, I want something more upbeat. Yeah, you understood what I really want, but it's not quite exactly what I want. So let me just steer my way. So providing that control to the user so that they can get to that listening experience. And, the system kind of like understanding what that more upbeat means, and, narrowing it down to a set of upbeat songs or fetching more upbeat songs if it didn't already have it in its queue. And, surfacing that to the user required quite a bit of engineering, I would say. So there are things that we do to cater to this higher expectation you talked about.
And over the years, as you've sort of worked on this problem, and music, I think, is now a real true first-class citizen in almost everyone's lives, especially folks of a younger age. Have you seen more intent having to be put into how music is categorized because it's so blended and unique?
Very much so. And I think large language models kind of lend themselves to this space of vagueness where, it's hard to be extremely structural about it. So one part of the organization I manage is called Understanding, for music understanding or content understanding. Music and podcasts are together in our organization. But the content understanding piece for music is like, just like you said, whether you understand genres very well, subgenres very well, and microgenres, names that people make up as they talk about music. This happens all over the world. Whether it's moods, whether it's decades or releases, or like there's just so much of vocabulary out there in terms of how you describe the music you want. So some of it tends to be structured, and we have our existing technology that kind of knows how to structure this and tag content to say this is how we understand this music. And some of this is not very structured. It's just text. And you're like, okay, what do I do with this text? And that's where I think LLMs really play a wonderful role in kind of abstracting out like what the user is trying to describe and kind of translating that into something that our systems can do something with. So I find that super helpful, and we have different layers of playing with how much we want to trust this LLM to kind of do that translation in its maybe pristine form. You can think of it as it just gives you the song. You describe something super vague to it. I want somebody that sings like Lata Mangeshkar, a very popular now passed away artist in India, who used to sing a lot of Hindi songs, but somebody more modern and who's singing in 2023, and it would come back with something, and that could be like a song by an artist that sounds similar to her or has the same vibe, and it could be pretty delightful if it got it right. Or you could say, I just want to understand what the user was trying to say. And maybe it comes back with a certain set of artists, and then you let the system kind of pick through that, and then, model the similarity and see where in the embedding space I want to map the recommendation to go back to the user, which is trusting the LLM a little bit less, not as much as like, okay, this is a song that I'm going to recommend based on like what they asked for, but then taking some of that and then like using the rest of the existing system, and maybe including all the personalization investments we have made to kind of come back with the right answer. So there is this, I would say, broader scale of things that you could play with in terms of like what is the role of the LLM, and all of these are things that we could try and decide based on the user utterance on what we want to do.
And you have to do all that within, like, I guess, for online recommendations within typically under 200 milliseconds, and that's quite an interesting engineering problem.
Yes, that does make it more challenging, but there are ways to offset that latency, and some of this can happen in parallel, some of this can happen offline, and some of this can be distilled, and there's just multiple ways to address that latency problem. Very, very much relevant to what you are talking about.
And as you maybe segment users, that's a natural thing that all data science teams do, especially on consumer data. Do you end up seeing the same types of users dispersed very differently across the globe, or do you end up seeing like the same types of users like clustered in a region? That just kind of came to my head because I'm just wondering, I wonder how many other people like me listen to music in the way that I do, but they're just not in my geography.
Extremely good question. So we coined this term called Glocal.
Glocal, okay.
Glocal. What we see is that Gen Zs across the globe do have some similar behavioral patterns where the music they consume seem to be global. They're not very local or regional, but then they have their moments of when they really want the local.
I see.
And so knowing when to specialize into the market and kind of draw from, the local music, and when to feed, sort of like this global feed of what Gen Zs like, is both an art and a science. So it's, so that makes the problem somewhat challenging in two ways. One is, the scale at which we operate, right, in the billions of users, it's hard to specialize to regions, specialize to even markets, let alone a region. A market as big as India, with more than 1 billion people, has a lot of, it's like a country of countries. So it has a lot of regional taste going on as well. So, multiple languages, multilingual people, multiple genres of music, multiple subgenres of music. local music of different forms, whether it's folk music or classical music or movie music, or these days there's a lot of indies that are coming out of there. Um, so what is local music is in itself a challenging problem. And then you mix with it, like, when do I go global? Like, when should I be recommending BTS to this Indian user because they also tune into Korean music? And when should I be recommending really the local music? And solving for that problem basically makes it a harder retrieval problem, because now you have a larger corpus than maybe the size you're used to retrieving to solve for this glocality. In terms of user segments, we do see patterns where there is a lot of similarity for people from Trinidad and people from India listening to the same music at certain point, and maybe it's not even music from either of those regions, and it's this Latin music that that's the most popular beat of the day, and everybody's tuning into that. And then you also see this type of, like, I'm asking for my local music at these points in time. So that's the challenge that we see.
Yeah, it's very interesting because like Trinidad is a good example. So in Trinidad, there's a large Indian population. So they have chutney music, which is a fusion of Caribbean music with Indian music, and that's its own entity. But they also like all the popular songs, and now there's Afro beats. So I imagine folks who like the Indian like music in Trinidad might really confuse a lot of the algorithms versus, well, I imagine by signal they're not that strong compared to folks in India. Like that will be the dominant pure Indian music that comes up, but it's a very cool problem.
Yeah. Getting lost in the aggregate again, right?
Yeah. I wow. This is it's quite interesting. And then can you talk about how language, so as maybe you're analyzing music, I naturally personally think a lot about English music. I imagine you're bilingual, so now you are listening to music on two different languages. How does multilingual music or multilingual listeners affect this
Yeah.
challenge?
Excellent question. So I personally speak 5 languages, and I know that in India, and this is very normal for any Indian, right? Like, so no wow about it. The in India, I know that there is at least 3 or 4 languages in which artists kind of perform across these languages, and sometimes the same movie tracks may get released across these languages. Um, I think the closest Western analogy would be like Disney, right? You can hear it in Spanish, you can hear it in English, and so on and so forth. So there was a time, maybe a decade ago, where audio embedding was sufficient to understand music. So I kind of know the tune, I have a way of representing what that tune is, and then I got the rest of the metadata from understanding that tune and knowing about it. But now, let's say if English and Spanish are the 2 renditions for the exact same piece of Disney music, right? It's not enough to just have an audio embedding. Now you need to kind of like have these co-embeddings with text so that you can kind of tell which language they are, and then you can kind of tell them apart because they may even have the same name, right? And then you're asking for it in a different language, but with the same name. For example, I think there's this old movie in India. It's the name of the movie is Roja, and it was released, I think, in 4 languages. Exact same songs, just the language is different, right? And if you say Roja songs, depending on who you are as a user and what you've been listening to. And the other challenge here is that the device language in India is always set to English, because Android localization of other apps, like non-Google apps, right, may not lend themselves well enough for localization. So people prefer to leave it in English. But then they interact with the phone in different languages. So you have to now pay attention to like what is the interaction language as opposed to the device language when you're tuning your recommendation system to kind of provide the right language format for what they've asked for. So and it gets more confusing for people like me who are listening to it in all of the languages. So what do you give me when I ask for Roja, right? Like all of these sound like the correct answers. So sometimes people mix languages even in the same thing that they ask for. So, people say Hinglish is a thing in India, like mix of Hindi and English, right? And the query is in neither language or in either language, depending on how you want to look at it, right? Like, so now the systems have to be trained for like these types of things as the normal, and then it has to kind of output, okay, if I hear a mix of these words and if these things come together, this is what it means. So both query understanding and content understanding takes on new challenges with the language complexity.
And you found that distinction between, okay, there's a team that works on just really understanding the content. There's a team that works on completely understanding exactly what the user is working for. That distinction or separation of, let's say, maybe even algorithms, it has been useful to attempt to solve this very diverse problem.
So far, yes. Having that focus has helped me quite a bit in terms of being able to solve this problem. But it is also true that they work extremely closely together to come together as embeddings as well into, a single model for the outcomes we want. So keeping the focus, but also keeping them close together so that it's an integrated view of like what we are trying to solve for. But the language complexity has been sufficiently complex that having a separate focus for like, what does it mean when we see these languages in queries, and with a possible diverse set of outputs, even given the same query, even given there is no language complexity in the query understanding itself has to kind of now scale to these different language requirements, and then separately the content.
It's quite fascinating. I'm super fascinated so far. But we've been discussing just maybe the recommender algorithm or set of algorithms or frameworks or systems that go into it. But let's talk about the actual product of YouTube Music itself and what it means to build. I've seen you speak about building trust with users, and to a degree, an algorithm is just one part of that entire experience. Can you talk about building the product to drive more trust?
Definitely. It is still a journey and a work in progress. I don't think we are anywhere close to the arrived sign for building trustworthy products in this evolving space of technology. But there are many considerations in terms of building trust. Um, One way we look at things is this user coming back to use this feature again and again, right? That shows you a little bit of like, yes, they kind of like what we have built and they are coming back to us and reusing them. That's one, way of thinking about trust. Another way of thinking about trust is just the responsibility, right? Like, we are not violating any, trust and safety policies, and there's we have a separate product that parents trust, right? Like when we build for kids and so on. So like child safety or mitigating security, there's no hate or harassment, there's no vulnerability. Like there is a whole lot of work that goes into that aspect as well. There is the cultural aspect, which I also find extremely fascinating. How culturally appropriate is something, especially when we are in this world of generative AI, and it can produce, different things in response to natural language. How much of stereotyping is happening? How much of bias is there? And I'll give you an example from India again of like cultural appropriateness, right? Like maybe it's not okay for a classical music singer to be performing, to be doing anything in the space of, I don't know, Bollywood, let's say. That's like a cultural violation of people's expectations or something like this, right? Like, so there's there's this whole mixed modalities that introduce a lot of new problem spaces when it comes to earning users' trust. Then there is the attribution side of stuff, right? Like, is this an identifiable voice? And, what is the provenance of this? And there is just so much training data these days and, responsibility around that. That also garners trust with users. And, our AI is like a large science in itself and a parallel track. And Alphabet and Google is like cares a lot about this, right? And then the longer term impact on the ecosystem, right? Like when you think about music ecosystem, there's the artists, there's the labels, there's the partners, and like how do we make sure that we haven't lost their trust either? Like taking measured steps there so that we have that trustworthy product, right? Like trust has just so many manifests. I'm not going to repeat everything I said earlier in
Yeah.
terms of building trustful systems, but in addition to all of those things, in building a trustful system, there are all these considerations as well for trust and even being humble as a product, right? I don't know what I don't know. Being able to like respond with like, I don't know is basically earning trust, right? Like that humility needs to be there in the product because we're not going to solve all problems on day one when we launch the product. So how do you gracefully error out, right? Like that's a separate track and consideration for trust. Being able to understand you as a user, right? Like the 5 songs for your month, like am I getting those 5 songs right repeatably and reliably and with low latency and always producing this exactly, at your fingertips when you ask for it. Like that's, earning your trust. So there's just so many layers I feel to this problem that, we are very much work in progress, but uh, that's the ultimate goal.
Yes. I think the more as this conversation goes on, I'm like, wow, this is quite complicated. So now it makes more sense why you need oftentimes such large teams to solve these problems at scale. So you mention generative AI. I'm personally very excited about generative AI and music. I'm very conscious of, artists and their rights, et cetera, et cetera. But secretly, I've always wanted to be a rap artist or in my country, like a soca artist. Soca is the genre of music in my country. And I'm quite excited by the possibility of the average person who is not a musician to experience the joy of creating music. Can you, maybe share what you've learned in terms of the experience of listening to music versus? Are you a musician by chance? I'm a
No,
terrible
I'm not,
musician.
not by a
Okay.
long stretch of the
Okay.
imagination. Love music, but that's where it stands. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
um, for a rap artist enthusiast or a soca artist enthusiast such as yourself, right? There is so many possible ways in which generative AI can help. There is one tool for songwriting that comes to mind. And this is something that's available from Google Cloud today. There is a publicly available demo, I believe. And I love that video that they have recorded. It goes like this. So they take a word and they kind of explore that word into many possibilities. The example they have there is expressway, and just taking the last part of the word way and kind of applying all possible meanings to it. WAY, WHEY, WEIGH, and sub meanings of each of these things. And then they kind of create this word explosion of like, what could you rap about if you applied all of these different meanings? And similarly, like express, like expressing your feelings, or and then taking X, talking about your ex-boyfriend or girlfriend, and or your ex-colleague, or like all your ex relationships. And then the word press, and thinking about like what are all the word formations that are possible through press. So we've not even crossed like the word expressway
Expressway.
yet, right? Like, and then now imagine doing this for like a handful of words, and then you kind of think of songwriting with all of those word explosions that generative AI gave you as a songwriter. That's a very delightful journey to take, to kind of trigger your imagination so that you could write about those things and rap about those things.
And that almost seems like a new evolution of product and a new digestion of music, right? If I can be in this and I can just be creating, I share it with my friends, and it's going to be an interesting time.
It's an amazing time, actually, for any creator, because I think of these generative AI tools as really a creator's aid or a creator's friend.
Hmm.
And once you have learned how to use some of these tools, right, like the world's your oyster, you could do pretty much anything you wanted. And I feel like in a future world, people who know how to use these tools, creators who know how to use these tools, are going to be so far ahead than folks that have not taken the steps to learn to use these tools. Because now look at the potential scale, right? Like for the songwriter in our example, right, like they are probably writing so many more songs that day compared
Yes.
to a person that's not leveraging tools that can be their assistants, true assistants. So I think that's where sort of this adoption of technology, making it easy to use for people that are not used to playing with technology, making that like super available. Those are like things that are very powerful and drives a lot of passion where I work.
Yes. And if you were to be a Gen AI music artist, what kind of music would you generate?
It's a great question. I think variety is the spice of life. So it's probably not going to be one single genre of music. Um, I like both the classical Carnatic music, which is like the classical music in the southern part of India, that genre, as well as sort of the folksy Bollywood music. And now, because I'm listening to Western music with my older one and younger one, I've also developed a taste for like some of the Western classicals, because my younger one is a violin player and now a flute player, and
Oh, wow.
she's pretty passionate about her music, and my older one is into more of the pop scene, and she's usually the one that's like recommending music to others and discovering artists that start out as indies and then become really popular. Like she discovered Olivia Rodrigo before Olivia Rodrigo was Olivia Rodrigo, so she's like majorly into like these niche things that then subsequently become like super popular. So she makes me listen to a lot of those kinds of things as she recommends them. So it'll be a blend, I want to say, of multiple
Yes.
forms of music if I were to generate.
Do you have secret desires to be a musician or music artist? Did you have that at any point in your life?
Uh,
From just listening to music? Because I noticed, a lot of people who are really taken into music, and they, they might sing along with an artist, and them going along with that sense of expression. I can only imagine what it feels like for them to maybe actually create it, and create it to a point where they truly enjoy it. Because sometimes, like for instance, learning the piano is quite painful for me to get something enjoyable out of it.
I don't think, given the number of amazingly talented people that I'm surrounded with, I don't think I've ever even like ventured to thinking about like,
Okay.
creating or composing music myself. Um, but I can totally imagine with this technology how some of these talented people could really blow your mind with the scale of their creations, and how we could scale these super talented people. um, I do look forward to a mic like this one, which comes with like a corrector, so that people that sing
Mm-hmm.
off tune like me no longer have to, like, I could just go and karaoke or something, which was not possible before, right? So yeah, I think for lay people like me, there are other uh, uses in the near future for our technology, but yeah, not quite there in terms of professional creations.
Nice. I'm very, very excited because I went through this period last year where it hit me like a ton of bricks that I had no musical, not intuition, but I had no musical exploration in my life. And I realized like, oh wow, an exact half of my brain is just completely shut off from the world. So I went and I bought a DJ set, a drum set, a piano, a beat making set. I bought every single musical instrument possible. I barely use any of them, or probably use none of them, because I'm like, okay, I want to focus on other things. But it was the sense of excitement that I had to even just engage that part of my brain was very exciting, and I still have that excitement. I'm just tempering it to be like, okay, I'll just go become maybe a Gen AI music artist for fun on the side. So that'll be my Friday, Saturday nights.
But that's so cool that you're exploring all those instruments. That's very laudable, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm learning to play the piano. So instead of reading notes, which my partner really gets on me, she's like, you should just read notes. I'm like, no, I'm just gonna practice this song. So I'm trying to play Interstellar by Hans Zimmer. So I've gotten like the first part of the song down, and I can hop on a piano and do that. So that's been, I think, very satisfying. And I think it's also helped me a lot with my even just machine learning career in terms of pushing the exploration and really appreciating the details that come from constructing a song and understanding the complexity of all of the notes coming together. And even as I speak to you about this music recommendation problem, the many different dimensions that music can really encapsulate, both in the past and I think coming up in the future.
Yeah, I think the math and music combination is definitely there in terms of like the patterns and like how you said music helps your math brain, right? I saw this with my older one. She did this project where so she's been dancing since like she was 2 or 3 or something. I can't even remember, for a very very long time, and she brought that into sort of so she's been exploring data science and AI, and I'm like super proud of her for like the explorations she's been doing. So one thing she did was like she wanted AI to help dancers. So she wrote up this algorithm where she scanned in a whole bunch of her and her friends like dance images and taught it to recognize expression. So the thing in dance that is the last one to come is this emotion or how to be emotive. So whether you're showing like anger or happiness or sadness, right? Like it's a step by step thing where you get the beats first, and then you get your hand movements, and then the emotion comes last, and that's the hardest one to learn to kind of mix it with the rest of what you've already learned. And so she wanted it to be like this feedback tool. Hey, you were supposed to express anger here, but it's not quite there. It's not fierce enough in your eye expression and things like that. So she actually
Wow.
figured out that the most painful part, as you can imagine, as a data scientist, cleaning that data and feeding it to the model, and like, oh my god, I have all of these images from the camera, I have to shrink it, I have to load it, I have to put it in a directory, I have to give it to the model to train. But I'm so proud of the output she got there. She also did a couple of explorations sort of in the healthcare space, applying something that was used for I think I want to say for the heart, to use for diabetic patients, or like the other way. Like my dad's diabetic, and so I know she wanted to do something there. So she, like, once she got used to this idea of like, I know how to play with a model and all of these Python libraries, and now she's like, the tools are with her. So now she's like exploring different applications for them. And I think she published the healthcare one, but not the dance one as a paper, if I remember right. So I was like, I didn't even know that school students could publish it. I thought you had to be at least in college or something.
Nice.
So I was like, yeah, super proud of her for that.
That's very interesting. I think there's a rise of folks in high school that are doing machine learning and doing very good, making actually very good progress. So that's quite exciting to see that shift in the field without needing as much education. You mentioned dance.
I think it's a real shift, because the I feel like computer science is going to become more of a high school curriculum now than a college curriculum thing, because it's becoming sort of like the basic toolkit, like math and physics and chemistry and computer science. Like you just have to have these tools with you to kind of like explore the world,
interact with these systems. Yeah, and I think the one thing we were talking about music recommendation, but in this generation, I think in all generations, dance was important. I think especially in the Indian culture, the complexity of dance is really tied into the culture versus, let's say, if I go, Americans dancing is a slightly different story, right? So the breadth of expressions that come in dance. Had you seen sort of like a shift in maybe listening patterns of music tied to dances? Because that's a very popular thing in the younger community. Like, all right, this dance come out, this song is it, and how dance drives listening of music versus just purely the beat of it,
Yeah, definitely, right? Like dance and music are probably extremely interwoven, as you can imagine. When it comes to classical dance forms, I think you can almost predict sort of like the classical music listening that this person
Hmm.
would enjoy based on the dances they view, or vice versa. And I would say similar things are true for like even short form viewing. I see, sort of the music centric shorts, if you will, um, eh, have its own theme. If I don't know, my younger one is checking out one dance short, and this is just your leisurely dance, not necessarily the classical variety, to an upbeat song,
Mm-hmm.
and and if the algorithm spots that, hey, this user is tuning into something that's like super music centric in terms of short form, then now let's give them other very music centric short forms that are like representative of dance. As you can imagine, this kind of marries sort of the audio understanding with the video understanding, because these two have to kind of now match so that you can recommend others that are similar in pattern, and maybe even like update the profile of this user with they like this type of thing where music and dance mix. um, yeah, a lot of potential there in terms of like how that could be leveraged.
Fantastic. So I wanted to shift into your career. You're very accomplished. You've held high positions at many different companies. Previously, you were at VMware and Cisco, and I believe, if I remember correctly, you had your own startup at one point. Can you share a bit more about these chapters in your career and any lessons we can take away?
Thank you for the question. For sure. The so I finished my undergrad in India from BITS Pilani, joined Center for Artificial Intelligence and Robotics as my first stint.
Mm.
I did a bunch of image recognition, type of work there, and then moved to Siemens Communication Software. This is before, all of like the internet explosion happened. So more on the telephony software is where Siemens was at the time. Then shifted to the US to be a hardware engineer. So my grad school was more in computer engineering as opposed to computer science. So I went from software to hardware. But silicon was pretty hot at the time. So natural affinity to Silicon Valley. Jumped around a bunch of startups. Most of them went belly up. One of them got acquired by Cisco. That's how I ended up in
Ah,
Cisco.
okay.
Literally grew up the stack. So uh, I think variety is the spice of life is a theme that has been running in my life.
Hmm.
As a kid and in my formative years, my parents had jobs that made them move around. So never stayed for too long, just a couple of years in each place. So always new friends, new school, new language, new everything. And that kind of translated into liking variety, as a theme in life. So I
Hmm.
was a ASIC designer, then an FPGA designer, then I did boards, layout.
Wow.
Then I moved to driver software, then infrastructure software. I think I wrote the first ever fiber channel over Ethernet for Cisco. Never did app software actually myself as an individual contributor. So I've only managed teams of teams that did, application software as such. But literally, it was like up the stack, and every transition was steep. Big learning curves. There was a point in time when I used to think Verilog and C kind of look similar. How hard can it be? That was such a naive thought. And to me, at least when I was writing Verilog code, people who were in the software world were just writing into the registers, and I was telling them which registers to write and what value to write. So you can imagine my shock when I came to the software world and realized that there is so much more layers than what I knew about. But but I think in hindsight, it served me really well to have that breadth first approach to searching for learning journeys. And there was a time in VMware, I remember it was like almost a watershed moment of escalation, because on the enterprise side, unlike the consumer side, the revenue of your company is determined by a small set of customers. So I would say like less than 20% of your customers kind of bring in more than 80% of your revenue or something. And we had machines that were crashing for these customers left, right, and center. So everybody, including the CEO, was tuned into this problem. And at the time, I remember that I was the only person who'd done both ASIC design as well as software in the whole company. I was like, okay, this is an ASIC problem. I guarantee you this. This is not a software problem. And people were like, how can you be sure? And I'm like, I have seen problems. And this is an ASIC problem. So then we went to our partner and we told them that we don't think this is VMware's problem. This is an ASIC problem. You have to fix it. There was a lot of back and forth, but finally, yes, it was an ASIC problem. And eventually happy customer story, but it was it was a moment where one of those rare moments where everything that you've learned kind of comes together and then kind of serves you well. I have had a few of those, career moments along the way, but I would say just learn for the sake of learning, and then somehow utility will come later. Right? You will find use for it.
That makes sense. What's your career? Just like everyone does machine learning, there's stochastic gradient descent, we're minimizing error. What's your career optimization function? It seems like variety is one component of it, but what else do you try to optimize for?
I think definitely variety. When I start to see monotony set in and I'm not learning as much as I was learning, I kind of move to the next one to make sure it's like completely different. I have been very fortunate to be surrounded by people who trusted me to give me those opportunities where I know nothing and then now I know something type of situation.
Right.
It's not always easy to make those moves. Initially, those were easy because it was like I was telling you, I just bounced around a bunch of startups before I landed in a big company. And then, so it's like a family feeling when you come from a startup. It's like a small set of people, everybody trusts everybody else. And it's like, yeah, I want to do this layer now. Okay, go do it. I want to do this layer now. Okay, go do it. Right? So that encouragement was there. And then people look at your profile and go, okay, if you've done this layer and this layer, it's not such a stretch for me to take a chance on you for this layer, even though you haven't done it before. And Google's a great company for mobility. So I remember in 2019 when I was looking at like, okay, I would like to explore the consumer space again, and I kind of miss it. I joined Google with like, the technical infrastructure, so sort of the cloud space, and then I wanted to learn search, didn't know anything about it. And so I was just having lunch with a person, and then they introduced me to a couple of people, and then within 3 weeks, there were like 6 positions to choose from. And I was like, wow, what is this company? This is just awesome for mobility. So that's how I ended up with YouTube Music Search as the next gig. A YouTube Music Search, then we did voice, then we did content understanding. So it kind of kept expanding, and there's been a lot of learning along the way, and it's been like a super fun journey on the consumer side. So yeah, that's where I ended up.
And most of these senior roles that you've gone for, was that a very intentional, hey, you express interest? Is that an expressing of interest to a person? Is that just applying to the job? How have you navigated? There's a different navigation internally versus, hopping across companies, but any advice on that front?
Externally, it's mostly networking, I would say. So if I were to, talk about like things to look for, for people specifically, I would say keep up with intentional networking. What I mean by that is like, if you're confident in your skill set and if you're like helpful and, trusting, authentic, like these features are kind of noticed a lot. And you have to collaborate wisely. Not everybody would share your vision for like the future and like what technology you should be working on, or like how you should even do collaboration, right? So having that professional networking capability where you're bringing something to the table and helping people kind of leverage that, build stronger connections, and that helps out in these types of moves later, because people now trust you, they've worked with you, and they'll call you when they go. um, it's it's also, I think, a cultural learning, like in engineering, right? Like we do a lot of like this devil's advocate playing, and you can come across as a naysayer to others, right? Like that are not in engineering. So, like, checking your perceptions. This is something my mentor taught me early on, and which has been super helpful, which is doing retrospectives. There was a time in VMware where I had a job which handled escalations continuously. So life every hour seemed a little bit different, as opposed to like, a little bit of constant and then something changes, a little bit of constant, something changes. So I have even done retrospective multiple times a day at one point or the other.
Wow.
But the habit is daily retrospective. So you kind of analyze your day, you write down what you learned from it. And over a period of time, that grows into a very respectable amount of information to learn about yourself and how to course correct. So that's a habit that I would recommend.
Oh, wow. I think you're the first person I've interviewed that has ever expressed that. It's hard. I imagine every single day you're being extra honest with yourself on paper, but it's quite interesting. So you talked about mentors. How have you gone about attracting mentors and I guess maintaining them? I imagine you have mentors to this day, and yeah, can you talk about what does mentorship look like at your level as well?
Yeah, for sure. I think I have been like super fortunate in identifying many, many mentors over time. I usually seek mentorship on a per quality basis. What I mean by that is, I used to run this women's network when I back in Cisco, and there was this woman who always gave extremely good presentations, and I was like, okay, I want to learn how to talk from her. And so it's like a very deliberate, this is
Focused.
what I want from this mentor. And there was this person who was always this dot connector. Like they would tell you which person to talk to at Cisco. And Cisco is this ocean of like many, many business units. So I was like, okay, I want to know how to become that person who knows all of these people and who can help others. So it was like a very deliberate way of constructing mentors. When I came to VMware, I became even more lucky. There was this sponsorship program. They picked like 20 of us, I think, in the company. I don't remember if it was 12 or 20. But and they gave us all sponsors. And as you can imagine, sponsorship is a little bit different from mentorship in that the sponsor kind of like makes you shine in front of others. Like when you're not in the room, they're like talking about you in a positive way, and so on and so forth. And so that was like a super helpful program to be a part of. And that helped me get more professionally networked at VMware. When I started in VMware, there were no product areas or business units, or those were formed subsequently after I worked for a bit there. And when those got formed, I really got this very, I would say, honeymoony job, where it went from zero to something. In terms of security products was not a thing yet at VMware, and then we built the first set of security products, and that was like a super cool stint, and that came, I think, directly from that sponsorship. So having a sponsor is something that I would also highly recommend. Same thing here. At YouTube, have a wonderful sponsor, And I have expressed every possible emotion, I think, with my sponsor, and kind of learned a lot from them along the process as well. But Google's a place where you build just so many great people. It's like a continuous thing. It's just an amazing feeling to be surrounded by um, people. There's just no other way to say it other than like you look up to like nothing. Like it's so awesome. When I joined Google, I remember the guy who invented network congestion gave us the first lecture on network congestion,
Wow.
and he's like, "Okay, you can come talk to me if you have any questions." And like it just felt weird to be having breakfast with a person whose books you have read and whose papers you have read, and it was just this really wonderful feeling of being surrounded by people whose printed names is all you had seen until then, and you kind of respected. And then this became like a constant thing. Now I'm used to it. I'm like, okay, this is how this place is. But when you start out, you have all these like stars in your eyes as you see these people. So it just surrounding yourself with people that are like that capable makes you better. I remember the first VP that I met at Google. He said, welcome to my team, and good people become great people here. Something like
Wow.
this. And I was like, yeah, it took me a while to internalize what he meant. But just surrounding yourself with great people and getting used to that imposter syndrome and looking at the positive side of that imposter syndrome of like how much you can learn from these people, I think makes life really good here.
Wow. That's beautiful. What would you share about, so you've run teams at these different companies. So even before we talk about running teams, I imagine you were an individual contributor at some point in your career, and then you made the switch and you started managing teams. And I think that's often a very sticky point in technical people's minds. Should I go the business route? How did you navigate that decision when that time came?
I would say not very well. So it's a long time ago now that I moved from individual contributor to managing a team. Um, at the time, it was not a decision. My manager told me, you will be great at managing this team. You're already tailing them. Just go manage. And I moped for a month. And I was like, I don't want to be doing this stuff. And when I did that, he said, do you know that your team gets to see the same face you're showing me here? That was a wake up call. I was like, okay, I'm not supposed to look like this. And it took me a while to adapt to the new responsibility and, being responsible for people. In hindsight, he knew way more than I did, my manager who made me a manager, because right now I would say I truly enjoy developing people. I truly enjoy, making that potential that I see in people real and like taking them there to, the heights that they could scale to. And I did not see those things at all at the time when I started managing. And the every transition has been steep. I said I mentioned this, not just in the technology stacks, but even in terms of like the role from going from an engineer to a manager was a steep transition. I did that twice. So I went back to individual contributor when I started in the software world. But the second time around, when I became a manager after being an individual contributor, I did that beautifully. I had that experience from the past, and I was like, yeah, I know I'm good at this. I can do this. And I really have enjoyed managing teams since then. And it's like being a one person army to an N person army, right? Like it's just the scale at which you can achieve things increases tremendously. And if you really enjoy working with people, then that's definitely your cup of tea.
I see. Do you have a couple more minutes after this?
Sure.
Yeah? Okay, cool. So I had a couple more questions. And what's, in addition to you exposing and providing a path for a person to really manifest the true potential of their talents, what else does it take to run world-class teams?
I think having a very lofty mission statement for your team, sort of being able to show, you know, a goal, a shared goal that doesn't seem very achievable when you start, right? Um, I think mostly the teams I have managed have been made up of people that are like super driven, very amazing, way better than me. And like, it's almost by choice. I like to hire like super awesome people and I like to surround myself with super awesome people. And that's the teams I end up with. And so just that goal setting part, I feel is extremely important. When you have that shared vision and you know that it's not going to be a trivial ride into that North Star. It motivates people, and that motivation I think is key. And the second one I think is culture of collaboration. It's extremely important for the team to um, feel like it's an environment where collaboration is rewarded. And there's a lot of nuanced thinking into organizing around this. If your I don't know, performance cycles are all about I, me, myself, it kind of doesn't it's not very rewarding to be collaborative if you treat it as a zero sum game of like who did this. If you do your retrospectives that are asking the question of who's to blame, there's just so many different ways in which processes can come in the way of setting up collaboration well. And so just being very deliberate about constructing processes that are constructive and lending themselves to collaboration, I think is also part of the recipe.
Those are very, very, very good insights. And I imagine at a very top company, you have all of these super strong ICs and everybody wants a big bonus and standing out. And so it's cool to hear that, collaboration is a big thing intentionally in the process as well. The name of the show is called AI Portfolio. And one of my goals is, I like speaking to investors just because I'm super interested in the startup space. What advice do you have for investors as they look at all these AI companies? Because I think it's very frothy time. You've been in a startup yourself. You've gone through the exit process. What's your advice to investors at this point?
Yeah, as we speak, my alma mater has a program where they've recruited me to kind of do this type of advice as well. So I will tell you what I've been telling them. To me, it's the people that matter. Because ideas are, if you've been in any startup or if you've done your own startup, you know how many times you pivot before you kind of land on the thing that you're building, right? Like, so it's almost inevitable that you will change your initial idea. So it's really who is the set of people you're working with, and it's not even the number of people. It's just are they working well together? Are they set up with the same dream? Do you see stars shining out of all their eyes for that particular dream? And do they have a well formulated plan that has de-risks built in, right? You can have a dream, but then you can choose to build every system yourself and write every line of code yourself, which is like, how we used to do startups. But now I feel like with the cloud and with the generative AI tools, there is so much that you could leverage rather than build. Do they have that mentality to leverage? And do they have, what it takes to be resilient? Right? Like those are the things to look for. So it's a very people set of factors that I would advise rather than a technology set of factors that I'd advise on where to put your money as a VC.
Makes sense. And any advice for startup founders? You've been on the falls, you've been on the ups.
If you are looking to become a startup founder, write down somewhere why you are wanting to do that. Because you will need several refreshes of that wise statement down the line as things get hard. Um, it's your baby. You don't turn it off. The cognitive load is huge. You are processing something 24 by 7 in your head. Are you in the right mind space to, take that journey on, right? Like sometimes, you have small children, you're in a particular place in your family where, that's not possible. Sometimes you're like, okay, this is the right time for me. If not now, when, right? Like there's different spaces in your life, even if you have that ambition, kind of time it well. Um, Perseverance and resilience, not to be underestimated.
Mm-hmm.
And there are times when you may be going after funds. It may not close. It may come with conditions that you may not like. There's a lot of factors that can go into these ups and downs as a founder. Being able to stomach that's the second thing I would say. The third thing is surrounding yourself and partnering with people that don't have the skill sets you have. If you are a software engineer, a glorified one, and that's why you've decided this is the idea I want to build out, you probably want partnerships with people with either finance background, product background, like people that are very unlike yourself. Don't worry about like, maybe I can't evaluate how good they are because this is nothing to do with like the things that I know about, but worry about whether, they can complement the whole.
Yes.
That's the thing I would say.
You did an MBA.
I did.
Curious as to why and what value you got from it, because that's something I've thought a lot about as well.
So when I was bouncing across these startups, went into Cisco, then went to VMware. All along the journey, I would have several startup ideas.
Mm-hmm.
I would discuss this with my husband, and it would be over a long drive typically. And we would never end up doing anything about the idea. Somebody else would go build it, sell it, and we would be like, damn, that should have been us. So this was like in a repeat loop of some sort. So the MBA was supposed to help me with building enough spine to do my own stint. And that's exactly what it ended up doing. So MIT is a great place for it. There's 80 different innovation centers. Pick your choice of innovation center, go get advice from people, and they'll tell you what to do, how to do it, give you a recipe, help you with connections. One of the people that I met while I was there, he shared two alma maters with me. One is, of course, MIT when I was there, but also my undergrad alma mater, and he was a great connection. People say you have to do 27 pitches before you can get your seed money. I did 0. So if you know people, it can also be very helpful. So it's really, that was the motivation for the why MBA question. And what did I do with it? I think it continues to help in different ways every day. When I was doing my own thing, all of the connections helped. When I came back to a big company, like the second one, I lost my co-founder to heart attack, revisited all of life's decisions, decided if I ever do a startup, it's going to be from the VC side next time, not from the founders side. And interviewed at Google and Amazon, and that's when I joined Google. It also gives you the language to speak. I remember, narratives I could start constructing. I could start anchoring, a slide to an idea. Like there were like so many different frameworks and tools and ways of thinking that I had been taught, which I had not realized I had been taught until I had to use them. And I still use, some of the lenses that MIT taught me to this day. So it's the way in which you can express an idea. It's the way in which you can connect with people and be very deliberate about the networking. And it's a way to grow the spine if you are a wannabe entrepreneur and want to become a real one. So you get all of those things out of it.
Yes, I admire startup founders greatly because it is a lot of stress you have employees, especially employees. Like headcount, I think is probably one of the most painful things that a founder could experience in addition to all the rejection that you'll get along the way. If you are a reader, and I classify a reader very loosely to a degree, you see me with a ton of books, but that's my way of reading, by just seeing them and just knowing that I could read them if I do. What 3 books do you recommend folks to read? And this could be from any genre. It could be something really personal to you, just something that's impacted you.
3 is the hard part of your question. Yes, I am a
Okay.
reader.
Oh, you
I
are?
mostly listen these days than read when it comes to books. Okay, let me try for the 3. I really enjoyed Invisible Women by Brené Brown, because we are, speaking about data scientists, data science and scientists. Just the sheer fact of lack of data about women and how she's like expressed that through a set of problems that she framed, whether it comes to road accidents or healthcare or like the bias in the data. I think it's a story well told. That's why that book appeals to me, and I think will appeal to this audience.
She also she did a Born to Lead as well, right?
Yeah,
I think, or Dare to Lead, I
Leaders
believe.
also Brené Brown. Yeah, multiple good books. I agree. Outsiders was a great one that requires no introduction. Sapiens was a nice read. The author needed more research on India, I felt, but that's just my own pet peeve being from India. But the overall book was a really good read. I also started doing very thematic reads. For example, I think 2018 we formed a book club at work where we wanted to learn about like Black people in the country with all the incidents that are happening. I read books like Caste, Some of Us, some of these books that kind of really taught me about the history of Black people in our country. And then it's very interesting, like the human psyche's commonality across the world, and very powerful reads. If you have read similar books and you're like kind of comparing history of one country with another, I think history books in general are really good reads. This may be dating myself, but I liked reading Being Mortal.
Being Mortal? I don't know that one. Yeah. Okay.
The biggest takeaway I would say from that book for me was like, have geriatricians take care of you in your old age and don't let physicians take care of you.
Interesting. Okay.
And these days, I think lots of different book clubs. So my undergrad classmates, some of the girls have a book club. They have great recommendations. At work, like I mentioned, we form book clubs and podcast clubs, and we have some, reading, listening, and discussion sessions with that. Very good podcasts I have also listened to thanks to these clubs. So that's a great way to read.
Fantastic. I just have one or two more questions. Another reason why I do this show I have another podcast called Caribbean Tech Pioneers. So I highlight stories from people who come from the Caribbean. And I think it's beautiful. There are many stories of people from India who've been very successful. However, how do you sort of see, not necessarily, the landscape of jobs will change quite rapidly, I think, over the next 5 years. How would you maybe approach the job market, let's say in the US or even at home in your region? What advice do you have there?
It's a really good question. It depends on whom, and I'll tell you why I say
that's
that.
Fair.
My younger daughter, she does this volunteering thing where every Saturday she goes and teaches English to a set of high school students who are from, challenging environments, economically speaking, from a certain region in India. So she spends her Saturday night. She will be, motivating them to learn grammar and vocabulary, and she would ask them to read a passage, and they would discuss like what they understood from the passage. And I usually sit with her as a translator. So it's a region of India that speaks largely Hindi. And this organization was founded by one of my ex-coworkers, one of the startups from long back. Her dad, and a very impressive fellow. He's like 80 plus in age and very passionate about making a difference to this region of people. And so she finds these people extremely motivated, and they have a real responsibility, which is also challenging in the sense that if this person in this family succeeds, it sets them up for like multiple generations, all of their extended family, and they're coming out of like really, from the poverty line into something that's more meaningful. So there is just so much responsibility they carry on their shoulders to be successful through these tools that they are given. And one such tool is, what she's teaching them. And there's like, tutoring sessions for physics and math and other things, and she's doing English. When I look at people like that and I say, what advice do I have for them as they come into the job market, right? I think that there is a bidirectional responsibility. I think their responsibility is to just, continue to do well like they are doing, ask for help where they need it, and not be bogged down by their surroundings. And the onus on like the companies where they will eventually be placed is to look for candidates like that, like look to make a difference based on how you are hiring, right? Like, so that is what we're trying to kind of make those connections. Now if you are from what I would call like a middle class, not quite entire circumstances, regular family, you're looking to do something in India, now is the time to do startups. It's a good time, I think, to be placing bets where traditionally, I think my generation was more around like how famous is the company that you're joining, and like are you well placed in that company, and like are you chasing the right titles, and like there is a different set of objective functions that people were optimizing to as a society in India. Now I think there is more openness to risks, and doing your own business, being an entrepreneur, like that's respectable. Like people previously would ask, even if they were like marrying your son or your daughter, like how is this other person placed in this company, or like will they have a job. Like there was a very security objective function. Now there is more of like the risk appetite, and like you should take those risks as a young person and like kind of seek the job market from that angle. I would say keep yourself open to change. Nothing's going to be constant. Like what you're learning today was probably not going to be relevant 10 years from now. And this is like a constantly changing environment, and just be open to, continuously learning, evolving yourself, developing yourself, but take those risks. That's what I would say. In the US, it's a very challenging environment economically. So be patient with yourself. I know people who have done, I don't know, 10s, 20s, 100 interview types before, they land things, right? Like, so it's not about you. It's not that you're failing that many times. It's basically how the environment is. So don't develop that sense that there's something lacking in me every time you see a rejection, right? Like just understand that, the norm has shifted quite a bit because of the economic environment. And everything is a cycle. What goes down will come up, and when it comes up, like you will feel like the hot property in town. So it's fine. Just keep, hang in there and keep educating yourself, and like, understand your mental health and the mental health of people around you, and like support each other. Like that would be my advice.
Fantastic. So I have a rapid round of 3 questions to conclude the interview. So the first one is, you're stuck on an island with a specialized chef, and you could only have 2 meals. Which 2 meals would you have?
Which 2 meals would I have? I think I would go for one meal would be avocado toast with egg.
Oh, really?
Has a little bit
that
of
is good. That is good.
Carb and vitamin and protein. So I have a nutritious meal. And the second would be comfort food. To me, that's yogurt and rice mixed together.
All right. Exciting. Next one. What is one thing that brings you joy?
My family, my children, my husband, my family, and I have to choose one, then it's that. Otherwise, it's reading and that. I
Reading
enjoy
and that.
both.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the last one, what do you want people to remember about you?
Ah.
It doesn't have to be the world remembering you, just, folks around you and your loved ones, etc., etc.
Um, yeah, I don't think like the world. I don't want to be remembered at that scale, so that's a given. I think I would like to be remembered for the impact I have had, even if
Mm-hmm.
it's on one or two people. That's fine, but
Mm-hmm.
um, the actions that resulted in some positive outcome that somehow change. Uh, it's a very lofty statement to say make the world a better place, but it'll make maybe one or two people's lives better than where I found that.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, Sujatha, I've thoroughly enjoyed the interview. I've learned a lot. I have, in my opinion, lots of things to go think about for career. One of the things I like to do is to study people's careers as my own, if that's my obsession, I guess, if you could call it that. And I really appreciate you taking the time to share your story.
Thank you, Mark. And I appreciate your time. And I feel like I should interview you because you're interviewing so many people that I know there's so much I can learn from all your learnings and your career as well. So hopefully we will
Yes,
chat again, but in the reverse
fantastic.
direction.
Appreciate you.